Okay, so let's jump right in. What we're going to do today is break down the central argument from the book Unhumans by Jack Posobiec and Joshua Lasek. They basically lay out what they see as a secret history of revolutions, arguing there's a specific playbook that's been used for centuries to tear down civilizations.
And this one line from the book, man, it just perfectly sums up their whole argument. What they're getting at is that a certain type of revolutionary, who they call an unhuman, isn't just looking to change society. They're looking to dismantle it completely.
So what exactly is an unhuman? Well, according to the book, we're not talking about some monster from a nightmare here. We're talking about a person who is just driven by grievance, by this desire to destroy. And this idea, this concept, is the lens they use to look at everything, from the French Revolution all the way to today's cultural fights.
So the whole idea here is that these revolutions, they don't just pop up out of nowhere. They're actually the result of a very deliberate strategy. So let's get into the first part of their framework, how a society is prepped for a takeover, starting with how you split it apart.
According to the book, the very first step, the absolute foundation of any revolution, is to boil society down to a simple conflict between two groups. You've got the haves and the have-nots, the oppressors and the oppressed. And the reason that's so powerful, they say, is because it creates this incredibly clear us versus them dynamic.
So the book actually pulls a term from the military to describe this whole process. It's called Operational Preparation of the Environment, or OPE. They break it down into this deliberate three-stage strategy that revolutionaries use to get everything ready for a conflict long before a single shot is ever fired.
Okay, so stage one, separation. The point the authors make here is that revolutionaries aren't just making up these divisions out of thin air. No, what they do is find the fault lines that are already there in a society. Things like class or race or religion, and they exploit them to pull together all the angry and aggrieved people into one powerful political group.
Right, so once you've got your groups defined, stage two kicks in, and that's the messaging. This is all about propaganda. According to the book, the entire goal is to build this powerful story where every single problem the have-nots are facing is blamed squarely on the haves. It's about generating as much anger and resentment as possible.
And to really hammer home their point on messaging, the authors pull out a very specific statistic. They cite a Washington Post database saying that the number of unarmed black men killed by police in 2019 was 13. They argue that media narratives made the public think that number was way, way higher, and they use this as an example of how messaging can totally shape reality and fuel outrage.
All right, so stage three. This is the real pivot point. It's about moving from just influencing the culture to actually grabbing the levers of power. The book claims that for any revolution to truly succeed, its supporters have to get inside and take control of the key institutions that run society. We're talking media, the universities, and the government itself. Okay, so the stage has been set. The environment's been prepared. The next part of the book's framework gets into how all that simmering anger is finally lit on fire. They call it the 3 acts of the revolution itself.
And you can see how this whole thing just ramps up. Act 1 is the spark, that crisis or event that gets the angry population out into the streets. Act 2, that's the takeover, overthrowing the old system. And then, according to the authors, you get Act 3, the brutal and, in their view, inevitable purge of anyone who's still standing in the way.
So after painting this pretty grim picture, this whole playbook for tearing things down, the book completely flips the script. The whole last part is dedicated to what they see as the counter playbook, the strategies for actually defeating these revolutionary movements.
And they lay out 3 different ways to do it. First, you've got this kind of passive containment strategy. The second one relies on a really powerful, decisive leader. And then there's the third one, which they seem to like the best, and it's a proactive strategy pulled from ancient military thinking.
So that first method, let them eat themselves, it's all built on the idea that these movements will eventually just burn themselves out. The book uses this incredible metaphor of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, arguing that once the revolutionaries run out of outside enemies, they start turning on each other. The movement just consumes itself from the inside.
Then you've got strategy number 2, find the great men. And this quote, which the book attributes to Spanish General Francisco Franco, just perfectly captures it. This isn't about sitting back and waiting. It's about a strong leader who has the absolute will to use force to crush an uprising and bring back order.
But, the authors make a really big point that in today's world, the most effective strategy is actually the third one, It's not about reacting to violence or waiting for everything to collapse, but about winning the conflict before it ever truly begins. And to back this up, they pull a quote straight from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. See, it's all about outmaneuvering, delegitimizing, and neutralizing a movement before it gets going. You make open conflict pointless because you've already won.
So you might be asking, why does any of this matter today? Well, according to the authors, it's because the battlefield itself has totally changed. We're not talking about these huge, violent government overthrows anymore. Instead, what they describe are micro-revolutions. These smaller, low-intensity fights that happen in the gray zone, online, and inside our institutions, often targeting just one person or one company at a time.
And that really brings us to the core of it all. The book Unhumans lays out this stark, repeatable pattern, a playbook they claim has been used over and over again throughout history. They walk us through the whole thing, from splitting society in two, all the way to these modern-day micro-revolutions. And they leave us with one big, provocative question to think about. Are we living through one of its chapters right now?